Welcome to the Pursuit of Progress podcast, where curiosity and creativity meet to explore the future we're building. I'm your host, Dane, and joining me is Trey, the time traveler, visiting us from an undisclosed point in the future.
In this podcast, we'll dive into the fascinating realm of tech innovations such as AI and self driving cars, giving you a deeper understanding of the groundbreaking technology that is transforming our world.
We'll also discuss the world of finance and investing, helping you understand the complexities and opportunities that shape our financial future.
Beyond finance and tech, we'll explore the human experience, discussing life philosophies and thought provoking ideas that can help you navigate your personal journey.
Our podcast is designed for anyone interested in learning more about the world around them, whether you're an entrepreneur, a tech enthusiast, or simply someone seeking inspiration and knowledge.
Join us as we engage in thoughtful conversations, explore new ideas, and gain insights that can help shape your path forward. Without further ado, let's get into the episode. Ready?
I'm ready, man.
Sweet. All right.
Let's go.
Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of The Pursuit of Progress. So we have talked the past two episodes about generative AI, the implications of that, just both positive and negative. We hopped into plugins and just seeing some of the cool stuff that ChatGPT is rolling out and what OpenAI is working on. And then just, again, the implications of what that looks like in our future. What we want to kind of pivot to is another AI implementation, which is autonomous driving. And Dane is the mastermind of all things when it comes to autonomous driving. Right, Dane?
Mastermind, I don't know, but it's just let's just call it a topic of enthusiasm.
Right.
um,
So
Less of a mastermind, but
yes, so
yeah,
he's gonna cover some of the stuff that's going on in the autonomous driving space. So without further ado, Dane, you run with it.
awesome. Thanks, Trey. So autonomous vehicles have been a bit of a buzzword over the last kind of 4 years. Elon Musk is notoriously known for having aggressive timelines for when Tesla will solve full autonomy. I think the first promise we got was that it'd be solved in 2020, and then in 2021, and then in 2022, and uh, and now he has said it'll come in
But
2023.
it's actually
But
almost here. It's
but it's
actually coming.
actually actually looking at a lot of there's a lot of ton of videos online of content creators recording their drives in full self-driving. The most recent one that I just saw was a guy that went all the way from between two major cities in California, so 600-mile drive, completely zero interventions. They
Yeah.
had to stop for charging once, and then the rest of the drive was completely autonomous. And I mean, it's actually insane. There's like some cases where it's a two-lane road, one lane going one way, one lane going the other way, and it knows how to navigate situations like where there's a car that's double parked and needing to go around that car to navigate. Um, so seeing it do those kinds of things, stopping at crosswalks and traffic lights and everything like that, doing right on red turns, which are illegal in the US, um, doing things like that, and seeing how rapidly these have been improving over the last few years, I'm super confident that we're around the corner from actually solving this and commercializing it. So what I wanted to do today is to talk through what does that mean for us? Why is it going to be an absolute net positive for humanity to have autonomous vehicles on the road? So, I have a little deck to take us through. Um, Trey, give me a heads up when you can see it.
All right, you're good to go.
All right. So, a future with autonomous vehicles. So, real quick, right off the bat, just to introduce who some of the main players are in the space. So, we've got Tesla. Waymo, which is owned by Google, and then Cruise, which is owned by General Motors. Um, these three companies have different approaches to solving AI. Um, so just to give a high level summary, Tesla has gone through a couple of iterations. They used to use a lot more sensors, but have now figured out that all they need to solve autonomy is pure vision. So just using cameras and neural networks and neural networks on the server side and an onboard a super advanced in-house designed onboard computer is all that they need. Companies like Waymo and Cruise use a lot more sensors on their car. So you can see all of these sensors around the car, um, and the downside to doing this is that it makes these cars incredibly expensive. So if we just look at how these different companies are approaching it, Tesla has normal, great looking cars. Some would even say sexy cars. So, the joke S3XY, uh, world's longest meme to pull off. Congratulations, Elon and team. But they sell cars to people like you and me. Great cars. They make a lot of money on those cars now, at least. They didn't used to, but they're in an incredibly good financial position now. So making around 9,500 per car plus $15,000, which is the current price for their FSD package, which stands for full self-driving. And that FSD package, $15,000, that's basically pure margin dropping down to the bottom line. So if you're looking at companies and which companies are succeeding financially, Tesla is clearly ahead above the rest. Um, Waymo, there's not official numbers out, but they're using a combination of vehicles from Chrysler and Jaguar, plus all of these super expensive uh, radar and lidar equipment. So they're running costs of 130 to 150,000 per vehicle, and then couldn't find any information about GM, but I find it hard to believe that it's it's uh, it's definitely not profitable. Let's say that because GM is writing down billions of dollars on this division of their company. So the other thing, sorry, the second
No,
thing,
yeah, you're good. I actually wanted to
uh,
ask a question real quick.
yeah,
So these are the main players, right? Who, like, as far as I don't know, like I've heard rumblings from BMW, for example, is working on things, and Volkswagen. Like, are they just so negligible? It's just not even worth talking about at this point.
I mean, they're worth talking about, but just in terms of the companies that get widely reported on, I would say these are the main. Obviously, Tesla garners the most attention.
Yeah.
Waymo and Cruise actually have vehicles on the road taking passengers around autonomously today. The other companies just kind of don't come across my radar as much.
Mm-hmm.
And really, like beyond Tesla, a lot of the other companies really just have the same approach, with not a lot of moats or things that distinguish them from each other. Probably the companies that are doing the best outside of these three are likely to, at least from my research, come from China. A couple of companies in China have actually commended Tesla on their approach, which is very rare these days because normally that's the wrong approach. You need lidar and things like that. But if we just take a step back and think about how we drive, how do you like? What do you use to drive, Trey?
My eyeballs
Got your
and this
eyes.
half a brain I have. So,
Okay, so you've got your eyes, which is vision,
yep.
and you've got your brain, which is a neural network.
Right.
So all of the road infrastructure is designed for a vision system plus neural networks, which is essentially what Tesla is doing. So,
Mm-hmm.
oftentimes sometimes the simplest approach is the best approach. The road was designed for humans using vision and using a brain. So, why can you not just train a computer to see the world, understand how to perceive and identify different objects. Obviously, those are things that, it's just part of growing up. You know that, this is a mouse, that's a car, that's a light post, that's a stop sign, etc.
Right.
So it's just a process of learning those things. Um, Waymo and Cruise and all of these companies that are using very expensive lidar sensors and things like that, we don't use that to drive. We don't have super high definition 3D maps that we're using to navigate the world, which is essentially like this little sandbox, right, where you can only operate in. Waymo and Cruise operate in these geo-fenced areas where the car is basically useless outside of those areas
Hmm.
because they don't know how to uh, how to how to drive outside of their little sandbox. So Tesla is developing a generalized solution for autonomy, and anyone can buy one of their cars.
No, it's a solid point, right? So it just seems like multiple fronts, right? The Tesla approach makes sense. One, like you said, the infrastructure of how we operate today is already designed to accommodate for that sort of approach, and then you kind of are there. It's less expensive, and then what net benefit does a lidar give you that you can't just accomplish with a vision sensor or vision camera? It really does seem like they over engineered the solution to accomplish a simple task. I say simple, accomplish the same task. Uh,
Hmm.
so yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I don't think that some of the smartest AI and the smartest software engineers that are working on this would try to use LiDAR if there was no value in doing that. Um, so I'm sure there are reasons, but if you just think about it from first principles, all you should need is to replicate the system that we humans use to drive, i.e., vision and a brain to know how to perceive the world,
Yep, that's a good
right?
point.
So basically, in the autonomy space, Tesla is developing a generalized solution, which is basically the customer's fleet. Any car after, I want to say it's 2016 or 2017, comes with the sensor suite that you can enable full self-driving on. It might be a little bit later now that they've updated different versions of FSD and also the hardware stack as well. But their approach for many many years has been to equip all of these cars with the ability to perceive the world around them, so that they can use Tesla can gather that data about real world driving to uh, to train in their simulations and things like that, and teach their neural networks. So just at a high level overview of the main players in the US market. Um, and why is this important? Why is solving autonomy a massive benefit to society? Um, so if we look at Waymo's website, some of this data is a little bit older, but they recorded 1.36 million deaths worldwide due to vehicle crashes. Just in the US, 36,000. It's a little bit more than that today. And then obviously there's a loss of life, but then there's also a lot of financial cost to that as well. Cost to people's belongings, cost to public property, the list goes on. And then beyond that, in a world without autonomy, driving and navigating the world is somewhat limited. Um, the statistic that they have over here is 12 million people 40 years and older in the United States have some form of vision impairment. So if you think about elderly folk whose vision might be deteriorating, or people that were born blind, transportation isn't as accessible to those folks as it is to people that are younger or have perfect vision.
Mm.
Um, so that's another thing. The main reasons: saving lives, making transportation more accessible. If you unlock transportation, I mean, everything in life kind of comes over that. No one just really like spends their day like in one place. You got to get groceries, you got to go to work, you got to see family and things like that, in order to, to live, I think, a fulfilling life. So access to transportation is really important, plus the human factor. Um, so one of the common things that's asked is, how safe are these things? So what we've got here, and what the chart shows, is that Tesla is by far and away leading in safety. So what we've got here is million miles driven per accident. So for Tesla Autopilot, Autopilot is this is mostly counting highway miles, so it's a lot longer. 5.5 million miles per an accident. Tesla is with full self-driving package engaged, one accident every 3.2 million miles. And then just look at how far above NHTSA they are. So NHTSA is the National Highway and Traffic and Safety Administration. This is in the United States. So just on average, across the entire fleet in the US, they record an accident every 650,000 miles. So already today, Tesla is recording accidents 5 times at a rate that's 5 times lower than the national average. Compare that to the data from Cruise and Waymo. Waymo, when they published their report on their first million miles, they had 2 accidents, so 500,000 miles, and then Cruise is way down there. They reported 23 accidents in their first million miles, so only 40,000 miles before a Cruise autonomous vehicle gets in an accident. Now, important to note, Tesla Autopilot and FSD are still definitely in the. I mean, they're not they're in the beta phase. So what a beta is it's not ready for prime time. So when it comes to autonomous driving, you have a scale of 1 to 5, uh, where level 5 autonomy is completely autonomous. The human doesn't have to do a thing end to end, versus where Tesla's at today is around level 3. So it can drive itself, but it still needs human supervision. So it's important to call out that Tesla still needs human supervision. They tell you that when you drive it and activate it, things like that. Waymo and Cruise, these are operating completely autonomously now with no drivers, but only in these specific geo-fenced areas.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
I guess I just want to add one extra thing. Like the conversation and this graph helps to even prove that case that I have whenever somebody tries to talk to me about autonomous driving and saying I'll never trust it, and then Tesla obviously gets brought up into that conversation. And I said, look, the reason like it's so evident that Tesla's safer than a human driving at this point in time, and will continue to be because you hear about every single Tesla crash that ever happens on the news.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that it is news should be an indicator to you that, like, if we were to do a side by side of how many news like reports it would come out if every human driver would be reported on the news, it would take up the entire news all day, every day, and we still
Exactly.
wouldn't be able to keep up. But the
Exactly.
fact that a Tesla vehicle crashes, you hear about it, it's broadcasted everywhere, and so I think this just reiterates that point that
Mm-hmm.
it's just so seldom that actually happens. Um,
Mm-hmm.
it's worth listening to or worth looking at. Yeah,
Right, exactly. Yeah, it just comes with the notoriety of Tesla, I guess. Anything Elon Musk related tends to get a lot of headlines.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, just to put this in context, accidents with autonomous vehicles in Teslas today, which are still supervised by humans, happen significantly less than the national average, at least in the US, where the fleet is the biggest. Um, so before we get into a conversation of like what this implies, um, one other thing is to consider is when we're thinking about like what are the other benefits. We said there was uh, we raised the accessibility of transportation. So basically there's some research from ARK Invest, who is an investment research firm, and they looked at data for the cost per mile of personally owned vehicles. And what you can see since the 1930s, there really hasn't been any change in the cost per mile to operate a car since the 1930s, which is crazy. And this is inflation adjusted, just FYI. But with autonomous vehicles, that cost comes down significantly, because you can use it a lot more frequently. Most people only use their car for about 10% of the time. The overwhelming majority of a car's life gets spent parked in a driveway or a parking spot or things like that. So you get to use the car a lot, and when it comes to ride hailing, you don't need to pay for a driver. So if we look at the cost per mile for an Uber, for example, right here is the cost for just a personal car at 70 cents. I think an Uber is more in the range of $2 to $4 per mile. And that's because you have to pay for a human's time as well.
Mhm.
So when you look at the size of the fleet, 200 million drivers registered in the U.S., an average of 14,000 miles driven per year for a total of 3.3 trillion miles, you can really start to see why ARK Invest talks so much about disruptive innovation and the deflationary effects that has, uh, which is good for folks like you and me because we can get the same or better service for a lower cost. Uh, Despite all of the Fed's money printing and stuff like that, um, prices don't always go up. Prices can also come down through technological innovation. And in this example, if we were to take, the if we were to accept ARK's assumption of 20 cents per mile compared to 70 cents per mile, you start to see hundreds of billions, if not trillions of dollars saved in the transportation market compared to today where there's no autonomous vehicles. So that's my little spiel. Trey, I'm gonna hand it over to you for some commentary. Um, and then yeah, we'll just go back and forth and chat about what this is gonna mean for us.
Yeah. So I think I'd love to know maybe your thoughts of we're still thinking under this model of everybody owns a car, everybody, and you need that car to be able to get from point A to point B. Um, with autonomous driving, it seems like you can now move away from this traditional model of you need a garage to house your vehicle. Like, what if instead you just had a car on demand, and you
Mhm.
were able to have a subscription based model of car ownership? Uh, what are your thoughts there, maybe?
Yeah, I think definitely we're definitely moving into that direction. It'll be very interesting to see how all of these different players choose to monetize autonomy, whoever does solve it first. Probably a subscription might make sense, but even if you pay on a per ride basis, it's going to be so much cheaper than today. Um, and then if we think about the long-term implications, to your point, yeah, maybe houses don't need to be built with driveways. Um, Maybe it's the case that uh, because you're going on a per vehicle basis, you're going from 10% utilization to probably 80 to 90% utilization, that you could see an equivalent reduction in the required fleet. So the global vehicle fleet, I think today is around two billion vehicles. We could see that come down dramatically. So think about how many cars that is off the road. We're going to save a lot of resources on manufacturing. Um, we're going to Autonomy is going to be favored by electric vehicles, so we're going to be cleaning up the climate as well. Um, but it also reduces on a cost per mile basis. If you think about the implications for you and I, a car is the second most expensive thing that we buy as individuals. That might not be the case in the future where we have cars that are operating 80 to 90% of the time because the incremental cost of transportation is going to come down dramatically.
Mm.
So car ownership will probably decrease. I think it'll probably be uncommon to own your own car. I can see a future where Tesla pretty much owns and operates their own fleet of autonomous vehicles and doesn't even sell them to consumers, because when autonomy gets figured out, um, the incentive to, I mean, they'll be able to make a hell of a lot more money owning, like, just operating their own fleet of autonomous vehicles compared to selling them to consumers today. But there'll also be millions of consumers today who have bought electric vehicles that can be upgradable to autonomy, and convert those uh, previously depreciating assets into an asset that can actually make you money. So that's another interesting thing about this, particularly with a company like Tesla who sells their vehicles uh, to consumers.
Hmm.
Obviously, like we spoke about earlier, companies like General Motors, Cruise, they're operating their own fleets. You can't go to General Motors and say, "Hey, I want one of those Cruise autonomous vehicles."
Right. Yeah. No. Kind of a few thoughts I have about that. Even thinking about a subscription-based model or something, I hear the WEF, World Economic Forum, jingle in my head of that everybody's probably heard at this point, is like, you will own nothing and you will be happy. And us in a capitalist society, it just seems so like uh, anti-American. Some people would probably even say, of like, no, I own this thing and this is mine. And especially something that's intimate to some people as a car, to think that you may even move away from ever needing to own something like that again. I guess it just kind of is another paradigm shifting thing, and it kind of going back to what we've talked about, of just like how we're slowly moving away from needing to have these physical assets, and that everything, the full supply chain of things, is just at your fingertips, that you need. And it just feels like this is just another step in that direction. And I don't know. I part of it gives me pause, but then part of me is on the other side is like, man, I would love to pay $10 a month, or probably not that cheap, but an insignificant amount, to have a car that I can just easily tap into whenever I want, wherever I want, and it's not another thing I'm having to maintain and think about and take up space in my home. Like,
Hmm.
I can just access that. So
Hmm.
yeah, kind of a rant there, but I don't know if there's anything you want to expound on.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I guess I tend to look at it from like, what is that? What am I going to gain from that? I think it's less about, I'm not going to own this thing. I don't have any, yeah, I don't have a car right now, because I live in a city that's super walkable. But as someone that still needs to get around from time to time, I would much prefer being able to pay $2 to go somewhere, as opposed to having to commit. In this case, if you're looking at a lower end Model 3, 40,000 US dollars. So, um, I don't know. I don't see it as a bad thing. I think there's that, obviously, like, not having to spend all of that money on a car means that I can save and invest for the future and set myself up for success in the
Yeah.
long run. And instead of paying that at an age now where I'm super young, is I can just take those funds and let it compound over many years. So I think that the pros, in terms of lowering the cost of transportation, making it more accessible, more on demand, and dramatically safer. It's already safer today, but there'll be several orders of magnitude safer than humans in just a couple years. So I think I want them tomorrow, man. If I could just flip the switch and have autonomous vehicles tomorrow,
Yeah.
you bet I would do it.
Yeah.
Because I think it'll be an absolute net positive for society.
Yeah. I I I definitely I definitely lean that direction too. I think we've just become like again so intimately connected to a vehicle, but it begs the question of why that is the
Mhm.
case, and maybe it's time to look at it like, you know, like any other piece of tech. Like it's just a tool to be used,
Mhm.
and you don't have to, like you said, you don't have to pay $40,000 for it anymore. Like that's a, you know, that's a decent lump into paying for education or something, an
Exactly.
investment that could compound over time, that isn't a depreciating asset that loses 50% of its value as soon as you drive it off the lot. Like it, in a way, you're driving people driving people, pun intended, to being more fiscally responsible, and because they, you now have removed a huge cost out of their lives.
Mhm.
So I definitely, yeah, I agree with you, Dane.
Mhm.
It's it's cool.
Yeah, I think today cars are still occupy that expression of personality,
Mm.
but let me tell you, um, when smartphones were becoming a thing back in the day, man, I can't even tell you, like, having a BlackBerry
Yeah.
was an expression of personality. But then beyond that, I don't know like to what degree this was going on in America, but Blackberries were like huge in South Africa.
Yeah.
And we would actually like pull off different pieces of the phone and exchange it with each other. So you could have like a black, you'd have like, I would have like a black Blackberry, my friend would have a white Blackberry, and we would exchange like little pieces so that we can customize like the look of this little thing that we thought was like so cool and revolutionary.
Mm.
Um, Fast forward to today, uh, phones are not really an expression of your personality anymore. Uh, Most people just have, you know, most people in the States or in Northern America tend to have iPhones. Android is a much smaller part of the population here, but obviously a lot bigger as you go globally. But all of that to say is we've seen shifts like this before where something goes from being an expression of one's personality, um, not sometimes hard to come by or rare in the sense that it's like uh, a prized possession, but then slowly becomes commoditized over time. Um, as you know, what's new today or novel today is definitely not going to be new and novel 5 years from now. So I think that things will evolve, and especially when it comes to transportation, that it'll be commoditized, and I think it'll probably play out much like search. When it takes most market. Um, there's not a lot of there's a lot of search browsers, but if you look at who the big players are, it tends to be when it take most.
Mhm. Why do you think that is? Like, what? I'm just even trying to think of that transition because you're right, man. Like a person with a Motorola Razor, like you knew that person that had the Motorola Razor back in the day, and then the Palm Pilot, and like
Hmm.
people were so closely identified with the phones they had, and yeah, that was a really good tie because I guess what I'm trying to mull through is. Even though I'm a tech optimist, I really want to see things for the tools that they are and not associate my personhood to to this tech, because I just think that's just a recipe for being let down. And you know that whole craze with the phone, it's like as soon as a new phone came out, your identity was already like was so closely tied to that. Maybe it was part of the marketing, right? It's like, oh,
Hmm.
you had the Razor 1.0, well, the new 2.0, this one's got new features, so you're missing out. Like your
Hmm.
personhood is being attacked at this point because you're now less than. Um,
Hmm.
but man, I don't, what what is that? And now, like to your point, now it's still the fight of, oh, I'm an Android person or I'm an iPhone person. You still have that competition, but the
Hmm.
I don't know. You're right. It's kind of died down, and I wonder what has changed
Hmm.
in the market, in people's minds.
Yeah. I think even in that space, it's becoming more and more seamless. I mean, Google is obviously is pushing, and they announced this. We spoke about this too. Google's I/O Day recently, where they were talking about their rich communication services, which is this open source communications platform. So instead of an iPhone user messaging an iPhone user and seeing blue bubbles, but then an Android user messaging it and seeing green bubbles, and it's like this whole thing. Um, just for context, that's something that only really happens in America, because I think most of the rest of the world, and especially like us in South Africa, we always use WhatsApp
It's a real
anyway.
problem. It's a real
Uh,
problem.
but it's like it's something that's really big, like in America, right?
Yeah.
But even Google is now pushing, and they were very, very blunt about it, but also kind of passive aggressive, saying, we hope that our partners and competitors in this industry embrace this change so that everyone can have a seamless experience. So I think that even in that space, if Apple does play ball and buy into this new rich communication services thing that Android has developed with this open source platform, um, I think that divide is going to it's going to close, and it'll be more of like just common practice. I don't
Mm.
think it'll be a thing 5 years from now. We're like, oh, you're an Android person, you're an Apple person. Well, I think another point is I think that whole like they release one version and then a year later there's like a new version and you have it outdated. Just for me, like in my personal life, I'm seeing a lot more people like holding on to tech for a lot longer, because I think the pace of innovation today is a little bit slower when at least when it comes to things like smartphones, right?
Hmm.
So you ride this exponential S curve of adoption. It's like it's the early adopters and then goes through and more people adopt it over time. I think that when it comes for certain technologies where you do feel like you're outdated is through those early phases of ramping up, because the leaps between technology platforms are a lot bigger. But now we get to a kind of like a phase where it just becomes common practice, and once everyone has it, the pace of innovation slows down to a degree. Uh, Apple's just released their iPhone, what was it, 14? They'll probably release 15 this year. I'm still like happy as a clam using my iPhone 12, and I know people that are still using nines, tens, 11s. So well, there wasn't an iPhone 9, whoops, um, but you know what I mean. Like
Yeah.
it's becoming less of a status symbol to have the latest and the greatest. And I think the only people that are still pushing the boundaries are those ones that are those super early adopters. But at a mainstream level, I think it tends to kind of plateau and just become commoditized.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. It's funny that you bring up the bubbles in the texting, because truly we had Google Pixels, my wife and I, and as soon as we got back to the States, all of our friends had iPhones, and we were the ones that kept everybody on the green chat,
Hmm.
and it people got upset. It's so much so it influenced us to say, man, we should probably go back to iPhone. And they had the dominance, right? And so
Hmm.
they could influence us in that way. But I think you're right. I think that tactic's not going to work much longer, where you can
Hmm.
essentially bully uh, people into getting a product. I don't want to call it Apple bullies, but it's a tactic that they have clearly used, and they've used the influence of people being primarily iPhone owners uh, to influence that. So, yeah, I don't know. I'm not a Google Maxi
Hmm.
at all by any means.
Hmm.
But yeah, I think the open source route and providing that platform for all
Hmm.
is a better approach than that. I think that just inhibits progress on things. Um, yeah.
Yeah, I think Apple will. I think they'll slowly open up. Um, one thing one thing that you mentioned was like when you came back, you said and you came back with your Google Pixels, and all these people were saying like, oh, you you have green bubbles. Um, I honestly I can see the same thing happening to autonomous vehicles. Right now, it's like if the average person, if you were to put them inside a Tesla using FSD or one of Waymo's vehicles, you'd be like, oh my gosh, like you trust that thing to drive by itself? I saw this headline about this big crash, blah blah blah.
Yeah.
Um, I think that once this goes mainstream, because of the superior safety and the rate at which it's improving, once you get to the March of Nines, which is that to say that today it's 99.9%, there in terms of completely done. If the
Yeah.
definition of done is there's like no accidents whatsoever, um, once you get to 99.9 and then 99.99 and then 99.999, I think once we get to that phase, you'll start to kind of like what people did to you, where they're saying, "Oh, you use an Android phone." I think that's how we'll view driving as well. Like, oh my, you're driving yourself, you know?
Yeah.
I wonder if like I want to have kids. I wonder if like my kids are even going to need to learn to drive,
Oh yeah.
But that's like such a weird concept. But I think that that's the direction that we're moving towards. Um, and overall, it's going to be a boost to productivity. It's going to be significantly cheaper if you have a long commute to work. Maybe you can get an early start, and you don't need to pay attention, and you can work in the car. You can watch YouTube or Netflix or whatever you want to play a video game.
Yeah.
Teslas basically have the same compute power as a PlayStation 5, so maybe you can just play some I don't know what video games you like to play, Trey, if you play video games, but on your commute to work instead of
So
instead of
it's
having to
still Candy
drive and
Crush.
and stress through traffic, Trey can play Candy Crush on his way to work. Um, so overall, the cost is coming down, safety is dramatically improving, and it's a much more enjoyable experience that is also accessible to many more people.
Yeah. So this is kind of a pivot question to you, and I know your opinion uh, generally about internal combustion engines and like the ICE vehicle makers. Uh, how can you like not steel man? I guess where do they fit in this? Where do you see like uh, because you say that they really are just that far behind when it comes to autonomous vehicles. Like that just seems like a feature that if your vehicle does not have this, like it's just going to be a no brainer to
Hmm.
not buy those vehicles anymore. Like, are they just dead in the water, or is this like? Do you see maybe a company providing a third party plug-in for these ICE vehicles to be able to just tap into and use? I don't know. What's your thoughts?
So I don't think it's gonna be a winner takes all type of situation. I think it'll be a winner takes most.
Mm-hmm.
Um, like Apple takes most of the profits in the smartphone industry, but Samsung is also a big player too. I think that there will be multiple different solutions. The Chinese players will probably have a favored solution that does really well in China. I expect Tesla's obviously got a very strong presence there, so don't write Tesla off in China. It's a big benefit to China to have autonomous vehicles for all those benefits that we already discussed as well. Um, in the US, who knows? Maybe it'll be Comma AI is another player that's big and making a lot of progress that we haven't spoken about today. They're striving openly to be what Android was to Apple, in the sense that they can have this hardware and sensor suite that you can put on like retrofit cars
Yeah,
with.
yeah,
Um, I think that Tesla will I think that Tesla will probably get to a point where they're willing to license their FSD. They'll say to these legacy OEMs, original equipment manufacturers that don't have full self-driving or an autonomy solution, they'll say, these are the specs that we need on your camera suite. We're gonna completely run Tesla software, because anyone that's been inside a Tesla and then hopped inside another car, the software the software experience is unparalleled. Um, so I think that Tesla will probably run software. They'll license their FSD, and that'll be the only way that these other legacy OEMs can stay in business. If they don't commercialize their solution, that is just as good or better. Because when it's your life on the line, you want to go with the safest solution.
Yeah.
So far, Tesla has the best safety statistics on FSD. They have the best safety ratings. A lot of people don't know this. They have the best safety ratings in terms of crash protection of any vehicle ever tested. Oftentimes, you'll see on these rating boards, boom, 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 1, 2, 3, Tesla, 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 and the other cars are like 2 or 3 percentage points below, which when you're at that level, it makes a difference. Um, so I think that to stay relevant and to stay selling cars, they will need to license it from someone,
Mhm.
whether it is Comma AI, kind of serving as what Android is. So there's a lot of different phone makers that use Android.
Yeah.
Um, So maybe it'll be Comma. Maybe it'll be another solution. I think Tesla's got a good shot at it. They're already doing things like opening up the Tesla supercharger network to other cars. So they're about advancing the world to sustainable energy. So if it means that other companies can survive the transition, and if there's enough demand from people to still buy those products, if they have this option to leverage this amazing thing that Tesla or some other company has built, I think that they'll have to do it.
Yeah. Well, and it's going to be in their best interest. They don't want to be the monopoly because they're just going to be forcefully broken up anyways if that's the case. So, I
Hmm.
mean, following in Microsoft's footsteps when they developed the Microsoft Suite, like just make that available to everybody. Don't try and keep it closed fist. Um,
Right.
and so, yeah, no, it's yeah,
Yeah. And I think what's one of the things that uh why I like Tesla just as a company so much is, like, back in the day when they were still in the very early phases, they open sourced all their patents and said, hey, like, this is our mission. We want to advance the
mm,
world to sustainable energy. Here's our patents. And no one used them. No one used them until they started ramping the Model 3, which was their first mass market electric vehicle, gaining traction, becoming profitable, and expanding the product line, their market share, and the mind share of vehicle buyers. Now you see people starting to take them seriously. But I bring that up because uh, Tesla is very unlike Apple in that regard, in the sense that they tried to open source their patents to encourage other players to come along for the ride, to advance this mission of moving us to a greener, more sustainable future. Um, and no one else really took him seriously. Versus Apple is like super protective, right? Like, rule one of Apple is don't talk about anything that happens outside of like these walls, you
yeah,
know. Um, so two very different approaches. The Tesla's mission driven, so I think that they will be open to licensing that. I think opening up the supercharger network is another show of good faith to that, saying like, hey, like, these networks are really expensive and expansive to build. We'll let you use our infrastructure. They'll obviously take a cut of the profit along the way, so it's helping their business. It's helping these companies that are using their infrastructure. So yeah, I think that they'll do what they can to help the industry, as they've been trying to do already.
yeah. Yeah, I think we're even starting to see kind of how Apple is being punished. I have yet to hear anything about Apple and their AI, like what their developments are. I mean, unless if they
Mm.
just totally wow us, I don't know, I have a pretty low confidence that they're going to come out with anything like just totally mind-boggling that hasn't that their competitors are already pushing out. And so you're you're kind of seeing that approach of being so closed fist about things. Like it's not going to pan out. Where the
Hmm.
all tides raise all boats. Like, you may have competition that's going to come after you, but at the end of the day, it's like you're wanting to raise humanity up together, and you
Hmm.
can do that. You do that through collaboration. Whether you know. Uh, they may try and take advantage of what you put out, like, but we, we obviously see the benefits of a collaborative environment as opposed to somebody being so tight to the chest about intelligence and information.
Hmm.
So yeah.
Right. Yeah, well, and that's now that you bring it up, Apple is also a little bit of a dark horse in this area because they've been rumored to have had an autonomous driving project.
Hmm.
I mean, they do have an autonomous driving project, supposedly rumored Project Titan. People have seen their test vehicles like out on the road. They've got permits to do that kind of thing. They've obviously recruited a lot of AI talent away from companies like Tesla and Comma AI and Google. So they're definitely working on it. I don't think that Apple will build a car. Um, I think Tim Cook, what he has openly said about it, is that they're working on autonomous systems. So that could be they could also just be working the software angle. So let the auto manufacturers take care of like building the cars, and then Apple, I think, just wants to take a cut of the software. But to take Apple seriously would require shifting the perception of what it takes to solve autonomy. Um, Data is the thing that you need the most. How do you get data? You need a big fleet. Apple doesn't have a fleet. Tesla's got the largest fleet of electric vehicles equipped with the sensor suite. So unless Apple just like comes out and says, "Hey, we designed these super like these chips based on like Apple Silicon that completely destroy anything else out there, and we've used like satellite imagery to create this model of the entire world, and we've just been training this thing completely in simulation, and it works." I don't really think I don't really think that that's like gonna
Yeah.
happen, but at this point, for me to take um Apple seriously in the autonomy space, like those are the kinds of things that far out things that I would need to hear or see, because um, still of the assumption from the research that I've done that you need a ton of data and real world examples in order to know how to navigate the real world,
Yeah.
which doesn't seem like uh, an awfully shocking or complicated thing to or a shocking line of reasoning.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know where to go from here. You have another
It's
thing you
okay.
want to chat about, or you want to call it?
Um, I don't have anything else. I got through my little spiel. Thanks for entertaining me. Um, what do you, who do you think will solve it first? You Tesla Camp 2?
Oh man, yeah, Tesla all the way. I think I'm in total agreement with you. Of whoever has the most data wins. And again, like you've said, it's just hands down. Tesla has the most the most people collecting the most data, like, and training it, and they just, yeah, yeah. I am a Tesla maxi. I will come out and confess. So
So here's just completely like company agnostic. Um, I so assume that autonomy has been solved. Doesn't matter who it is. If autonomous vehicles are solved and you, Trey, were tasked with building and designing a city, like how do you think that new city would be constructed compared to what we have today?
well, I mean, knowing what Elon's even built, the Boring Company, I would find ways to create tunneling systems. Forget all of these overpasses and building on top of things. I mean, that costs billions of dollars. I mean, to build that kind of infrastructure, where now digging infinitely deeper and building an interconnected network that way, you couple that with autonomous vehicles, that just makes sense. You can make a smaller footprint for cities and towns, and honestly, that's how I would probably approach that. And
Yeah.
and now existing cities that have streets, and think about how much percentage of that footprint is taken up with streets. You can now demo all of that, and you can make room for more infrastructure and buildings.
And parking garages.
Sure.
Parking garages just sitting there full of, hundreds of vehicles, completely stationary, not doing anything. Those could probably be repurposed and turned into shopping malls, um, into residential. Um, who knows, man? I think cities of the future will look, or at least like new cities will look a hell of a lot different, and probably the existing infrastructure in cities today will probably change a lot as well. So it'd be really interesting to see how that all plays out.
Yeah, most definitely. It's an exciting time to be alive.
Exactly. All right. Well, I think that we're wrapping up. So thank you all beautiful, wonderful people for tuning in. We appreciate you hanging out with us. This is me, Dane, signing off.
Yes.
And
Yeah, thank you guys. Super thankful for all of y'all that tune in. Yeah, if y'all don't forget to like and subscribe if you like this content. We also want to hear back from y'all. Just if please put in the comments if you like this or hate it. We just want to know. We're obviously still just babies at this whole podcast thing. We're just here having fun, just two goofballs having fun, and have some data to back up our claims, and have fun along the way. So we want you all to join in on. Oh, you go ahead.
and we're learning too. So if you have any questions, or you think that uh, we're totally wrong or totally right, let us know. Love to engage with you in the comment section.
Most definitely. Yeah. So definitely. Thanks again. Appreciate y'all, and stay tuned till the next episode. All right. See y'all.
Ciao.